Good morning and thank you for joining us. The topic of discussion today is small hive beetle and how to save your colony from slime out. So slime out is like the end stage where these little black beetles get into your hive, they lay their eggs down the cells, and they might lay 30 eggs in a cell or even in just a part of a comb or in the pollen. Then what happens is those small hive beetle eggs, they hatch and the larvae then start worming their way around all the combs. And if left unchecked and the hive beetles get the upper hand, it all turns into a big slimy mess. And if you don't do anything about it, your colony will die out. Now, usually a colony that's strong will keep the hive beetle under check. I almost do nothing in all of my hives. We're in a very hive beetle-y area. It's humid here. This is the time of year when it's hot and wet that the hive beetles really do thrive. Now, many continents in the world have the hive beetle, and let's have a look. We actually should be trapping them down in the bottom tray here. And look, you can see a few running around here. I'll just pick one up. There we go. There's a small hive beetle. That's what they look like, the little black round beetle. You get them in the compost heap, you get them just everywhere around in nature. They came to Australia about 20 years ago now, something like that, and they're in most continents of the world as well. So in the wetter, humid areas, they really do take hold, these little beetles. Now, what you want to be doing is, if your colony gets weak, now this is on the rebound. This hive lost its queen, they got very thin on the ground. The numbers are starting to come back now, which is good. But even so, being a weak colony trying to recover, we ought to be catching some of those hive beetles in whatever way we can. We have this pest management tray down the bottom. Interestingly enough, last week we were talking about chalk brood in the hive. And here we can see some of the chalk brood mummies falling through, which is a good sign that they're cleaning out some of the chalk brood, and we're going to need to keep an eye on that. But back to hive beetles, what you need to do in order to help trap those hive beetles is put some cooking oil in the tray down here. And you're simply just covering all of the surfaces. You don't need to fill up your tray. You're just putting a bit in each segment like that. You're sliding the tray back in, and that works quite effectively to catch a lot of beetles, because the bees will chase them around the hive and they'll fall through the screen, mesh bottom board at the bottom, down into the oil. Now, we're just going to close that back up. But what we're talking about today is the later stage where you're trying to save your colony from slime out. So it's a horrible thing when it happens, but I have successfully saved a number of colonies from totally losing them when the hive beetle slime has really set in. And here's what to do. So first of all, you need to have a look. If you look in the tray and you're seeing lots of wriggling maggots, now a couple might be, you might see a few wax moth larvae down there, you might see the odd hive beetle larvae, perhaps the beetles have even laid some in the tray and they've emerged in there. So it's not necessarily when you see a couple that you're at a late stage emergency hive beetle situation. But if you start seeing lots and you remove them and they're coming back, then you really need to get in as soon as possible and inspect your hive and see what's going on. Now, if you get in there and there's patches of the comb that have what looks like slime over them, and if you look closely you'll see the hive beetle larvae like little maggots wriggling around. Horrible sight, right? Then what you need to do is give your hive the best chance. So if you've got questions, put them in the comments and we'll get to answering those after I talk a bit more about these hive beetles. So those adult hive beetles have laid their eggs. 3 to 6 days later, they're now emerging all over the hive. Your colony hasn't been strong enough to stop the hive beetles laying, and all of a sudden you've got these maggots and slime on a lot of the combs. So what you're going to need to do is remove the honey super. Now that's important because a colony that isn't strong enough to cover all the frame surfaces won't be able to keep the hive beetle at bay. So you need to remove the honey super and put that into a freezer. put it in the freezer for at least 3 days. They'll kill any eggs and hive beetle larvae in the flow frames. So that way, if they're not too badly affected, you can put them back on later. So the frames come out in the freezer. Next, you've got your bottom box open. On the edges, you typically have honey and pollen. Take it away. It's a bit counterintuitive because you're trying to nurture your colony and you don't want to take away their food. But if you leave them too much area and they're at a late stage slime out, then what's going to happen is they won't be able to keep it under control and it'll turn into a maggot nest instead of a beehive, which is unfortunate and messy to clean up. So what you'll need to do is take away these frames. Now, your colony is small. Ideally you have some frames to replace it with, so you could just, if you're using naturally drawn combs, just chop out the honey and the pollen from the edges, the stuff that's been affected by the hive beetles, and leave just a centre brood nest only. You can replace these with empty frames or chop it out, as I said, or in this emergency situation you can just leave it blank. Now try not to do that for too long, because as they get on their feet they're going to start to build random comb on the edges where there's no frames. But if you just give them a small amount of comb area to look after, they will likely be able to get on top of that and bounce back. And that's a method I've used a lot, and it's worked very well for that situation where you're just about to lose your colony to small hive beetle. As the colony builds back up, you'd follow the same procedure as when you're supering. Make sure all the frames are built out. Again, the hive's strong, and then you put your super back on again. So it's this time of year, we're here in Australia, it's really wet and sweaty and muggy and the hive beetles are going crazy. We're hearing some stories of people losing their colonies. That's sad, better luck next time. And sometimes you just get bad luck where a really strong colony will go down for whatever reason, but it's pretty unusual. All of these hives here are in an extremely hive beetle zone, and they're fine when they're strong. Just focus on the weak ones. When the numbers are dropping, you're looking in the window, you're not seeing very many bees, make sure you're staying on to trapping the beetles, and make sure you look out for any signs of a lot of larvae coming out of the combs, because that's when you really need to get in there and fix the situation. Any questions, put it in the comments below, and hopefully this hive is okay. I can see the numbers building. It's got the chalk brood issue. This is a prime candidate of a hive to look after and nurture back into a thriving honey producing hive. Any questions?
Cedar, I would like to know a bit more about this base, and in particular how the features allow you to prevent small hive beetle.
So this tray, as we were showing you earlier, is made for a number of things, but the one related to small hive beetle is this pest management tray. Now we've got two types of trays. This has since been upgraded to an injection molded yellow one. This is one of the older trays, and this is where you get a bit of a tea leaf reading of what's going on in your hive. This is where you can see if there's small hive beetle larvae dropping out of the frames and down into the tray, so it's a good spot to check. And you're also checking for signs of actual hive beetles, which we did see one earlier. There it is there, and we've just put the oil in, so we should expect to catch 50 to 100 hive beetles in this tray over the next few days.
How come we're not seeing bees fly out when you take this tray out?
So if bees are flying out when you take this tray out, then you've got an issue that needs fixing. This pushes all the way forward and seals against the front. Now if you look under there, what you'll see is a screened bottom board. I'm not sure if you can get down that low to see it, but let's see if we can put the camera right underneath. And what you see there is the screened bottom board, which allows the bees to chase those beetles around, and you'll get a whole bunch that go right through that screen as they try and get away and drown in the pest management tray. People also use this tray for counting varroa mites and things like that. We don't have those here in Australia, so lucky for us, but many continents have that. And there's also ventilation control. So you can take the tray out altogether if you want a whole lot of ventilation. You can put vents up for the hot times or you can put vents down to limit the ventilation if you really want to slow that down in the colder times. Bees will be fine even in the snow with an open mesh bottom board. So you don't necessarily have to switch this around in the colder times. You can let plenty of ventilation go through.
Hey Cedar, we've got a question from Bridget saying, what about rodents getting attracted to the oil in the tray?
Okay, it's a sealed area, so if rodents were to get in there, it means they would have chewed away all the woodenware. And I haven't heard of that, but I guess it's possible. So you'd keep a lookout for chewed, the woodenware or the tray being chewed by rodents. It's not something we see here, but let us know if that's happening for you.
Okay, and we've got somebody asking, what's the best thing to put in the ant guards? Arnold is asking, what's the best thing to put in the ant guards to stop them crawling up? What kind of oil do you use in there?
Okay, so these ant guards are made as an ant barrier. You can see how we're not using it now. We don't have an ant problem. Ants seem to come and go as an issue. So when you find the ants are annoying you, they're only a cosmetic issue really, they don't affect the bees, but let's say there's all ants in behind the inner cover here. There's ants when you take the windows away, they're up under the roof and it's just, oh, there's one, then it's annoying you. Then what you can do is create an ant barrier. Now these little ant guards that come with our Flow Hive 2 Plus and also retrofit to the Flow Hive 2 are made so that you lift this top up and then you can put either cooking oil or some grease in there. So you'd use Vaseline, like a white grease, so it's not so messy. You can put that in this area here. The grease will last longer than the cooking oil. The cooking oil tends to wash out after some time in the rain. But the idea is this lid helps stop the washout because you put it down over the top of the oil. So sometimes it's good to have a little, you know those little oil bottles, the typical old ones you used to put a bit of oil on your sewing machine or your bicycle chain with. Those are neat for using to fill up this area. So this has got a bit of debris in it, so I need to take that out because that might create an ant bridge to get across it. You put your oil in there, and the next thing to do is any foliage that's touching the hive you'll need to cut away because the ants will use that as a bridge also. And any mulch from the garden that's up on the ant caps you need to clear away. So you need to create this ant moat, if you like, on each leg, and then you'll need to lift up the roof and get all the ants out of there, dust them out of behind the covers, and you might need to do that a couple of times, and then you'll find the ant problem will go away for some time until next time, and then you can repeat the process.
What about things like spiders?
So spiders don't cause issues with beehives. Sometimes you'll find them making a little cozy home under here, but not so much an issue for bees.
Would it work for the hive beetles too, Cedar, to keep them away with the ant guards, or they can fly so it doesn't help?
Hive beetles can fly, so they can actually fly 15 kilometres, which is a long way. And they will follow scents on the breeze, looking for compost bins, beehives, any kind of nice, warm, humid, organic home. And what they do is they'll just fly in, land on the hive, and they'll find a way in. So they'll walk in the entrance, and ideally the bees chase them down through the screen, but some of them will go up into the hive as well. So you'll see them when they get bad, you'll see them in empty cells. If you get empty cells here, and you might see heaps of hive beetles in them. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing if there's enough bee numbers that can keep them in check and stop them getting around the hive and laying in your pollen and honey frames. So if you see that and your colony is strong, your beehive is likely still fine, but it's a sign you should start trapping some of those beetles. But yeah, typically you'll get times of the year in this area where there's not much honey in the frames, and the bees will be using those areas to hold the beetles in jail, if you like. The flow frames are good for that because they've got parts that the beetles can't chew through, and the larvae can't chew through either, so they kind of get contained in an area.
Okay. Hey Cedar, you mentioned you can put some Vaseline or grease in the ant guards. Someone's asking, can you do that in the pest tray as well?
That's not something I've ever done. I think that would get, it's just so much Vaseline. I think the cooking oil is a better one for there. And you've got it's an organic thing that you can wash away with the hose into the corner of your garden, and it's a good way to clean it, whereas the Vaseline then would be a petrochemical product which you wouldn't want to use that much of, I think, all the way through your pest management tray. Some people use detergent and water. Detergent actually clogs the exoskeleton pores that insects breathe through, and also kills all types of insects, including bees. So detergent and water can kill hive beetles as well. So it's another thing some people do.
Okay. What else have we got? Someone's saying that they took their tray out because of extreme heat, and what will happen then? Will the bees just chase the hive beetle out and the hive beetle will come straight back out again, or?
If your colony's strong, don't worry about it. The colony will keep the hive beetles at bay. When it's weak, activate your pest management tray, catch those beetles, give them a better chance. Hive beetle slime mat is 99% of the time a secondary problem where you've lost your queen and the numbers have dropped, the hive swarmed, the numbers have dropped, there's chalk brood all through it, so the numbers have dropped. Something causing the colony to shrink in size and not being able to stop those pesky little hive beetles from laying.
We've got Marcelo in Melbourne. He's saying, is it too late to add a super to a full brood box? Thanks guys, keep up the great vids.
Too late? Sorry, whereabouts are they again?
He's in East Melbourne.
East Melbourne, too late. I would say not. We're still in summer here, and you'll probably get a bit of a good flow in the summer, and maybe even an autumn flow as well. My sister keeps bees in Melbourne, but there's a lot of beekeepers down that way, so ask around and see what people think. If your colony's really asking for a super, as in there's a lot of bees, then I think it'd be a good idea to put one on and let them store some honey.
Hey Cedar, I got another question. We had a customer yesterday saying that they had a slime out and it happened they found like it happened almost overnight. How quickly do they happen, and if you're doing regular inspections, can you detect them a while off before you get to that stage, or can it be sudden?
Look, it can be quite sudden. It really depends a little bit. So normally the hive's really strong, it's keeping the beetles at bay, they're not able to lay very many eggs. So when there is a few larvae, the bees just eject them from the hive and away they go. They've got it under control. If there's a down moment, let's say your hive swarms, or for whatever reason the colony numbers drop, there's a few other reasons which I'll go into as well, then what can happen is the hive bees will take advantage of that, and if there's lots in your hive, they can lay 30 or so eggs in one little cell, and they can lay thousands in a day. Then what will happen is 3 to 6 days later, those hive beetles will emerge as tiny little grubs first, so that's their larvae stage, and they'll worm their way through the combs, making a mess. If they're in the brood comb, they'll even go right through the larvae, right through pupating bees' heads and things like that. That's another sign of hive beetle slime out coming, is damaged brood being ejected from the hive, where they've actually, there's a white half metamorphosized bee with bits of its head missing and things being ejected out the front. That could be hive beetle damage as well. So you could get into a situation where it happens very quickly. If suddenly the beetles have been able to lay thousands of eggs around the hive, and 3 to 6 days later you might have this bloom in the hive beetle larvae. Strong colony can again usually get on top of that. If they're a little bit weak, maybe not, and it's a downward spiral. So at that point you'll need to jump in and do what we talked about earlier, take away everything except for the centre brood frames, and let the bees just manage that, get control, and build up again from there. What you do with the frames you've taken away, the frames here go in a freezer. That will kill hive beetle eggs and larvae. if you don't have a freezer and you've got frames to deal with, then you can drown them, but that's a lot more messy than freezing. So you put them underwater, submerged with the weight on top, and that will also drown the hive beetle larvae and eggs. So you'd leave them under there for 3 or 4 days, and then you'd go through a clean-up phase after that, getting it all ready to start your colony again. Not a fun topic today, but it's horrible when it happens, and some people have been experiencing it recently, so hopefully this helps a few people save their colonies if they get into a late stage hive beetle slime out. Question?
Cedar, is there any difference for people using 7-frame hives or double supers or triple supers in terms of managing small hive beetles?
It's pretty much the same. Either way, you're trying to size down the size of your colony, the size of your hive to suit it. So if you've got 4 boxes on, more supers, more brood boxes, and you get a situation where the colony really shrinks down, then you're at risk of a slime out from the hive beetles if you've got a lot in your area. So again, you're going to need to reduce the size of your colony right down, and you might find that reducing it to, if you had 4, reducing it to 2 boxes is enough, and you've still got heaps of bees covering the surfaces of all the frames. So it's about sizing the amount of work the bees need to do for them. So you need, if you've only got a small cluster of bees left, then you'll need to only save a few frames for them to work with, and all the rest you need to take away. If you've got a big colony and they're looking a bit thin, but there's still lots of bees in there, then take a few boxes off and reduce it down. So it's the same principle, even if you've got a larger hive.
Cedar, what about with all this rain we've been having? I guess not being able to get in and manage the hive beetle can be an issue. What should you do if you get like over a week or 2 of rain at a time for the hive beetle? Okay,
so a week or 2 of rain is what we're getting at the moment. And what you'll need to do is just clean out your tray more often than you normally would and put some more oil in it. What will happen in rain is that you get driving rain blowing in the entrance and washing out some of your oil eventually. So pull the tray out, give it a bit of a wash with a hose, some fresh oil in there, tray back in. And that's about all you need to do, and just keep an eye on bee numbers. You really only need to really activate and start rescuing your hive from hive beetles when the bees are looking thin on the ground. This is like halfway back to being good, but let's see if we look in this window how many bees we've got. That's a bit better. So if your colony's looking like that, there's lots of bees in the window, and they're generally going to be okay. So when you open the door and there's like a quarter of that amount of bees just milling around on the frame, and you know that the numbers are a bit thin. Obviously, lots of regions don't have hive beetles, and also in colder places they don't seem to be as much of a problem. It's really the warm, humid areas that get the small hive beetle attack.
We've got somebody asking, Cedar, what about diapic on that?
So the issue with diatomaceous earth in a tray is when the rain comes, it's going to get wet and then it won't work anymore. So for that reason, I'd use oil, or you can experiment with detergent and water as well. Now, I probably wouldn't use detergent and water in the colder times because you'll get a lot more condensation all around the hive because you've got a big tray of water underneath. But in the warmer times, by all means, try detergent and water. It's a bit less messy to clean out each time, and it does work also.
James is asking, he just pulled out his pest tray and he has hundreds of bees hanging on the bottom of the metal vent. So what's going on there?
Okay, so it could be a few things. Each time you take out that tray, just have a look, like we had the camera under there earlier. So just have a little look before you put it back. If you've got bees under there, and you put your tray back in, then you'll end up with a lot of bees trapped in there that'll die in the oil, which isn't good. Now, if you brush those bees away with a bee brush or some foliage, you might need your smoker, get them out of the way, or just wait till they're gone to put the tray back in. perhaps early in the morning when a lot of those bees are back in the hive, then you seize that moment to put your tray back in where there's no bees under there anymore. And the next thing to do is really make sure this vented cover is pushed up tight. That's the seal. If it's sitting out a little bit, like this, maybe these L screws are wound out and your cover's sitting out a bit like that. That'll create enough of a gap between this and the tray to allow bees to come up from underneath and explore that area. Now, if it's really hot, your hive's like really healthy, there's bees like all over the front of the hive and that they're all around underneath as well, and they'll find their way up into there. So that's the first thing to test. If you still find you've got all of the bees out of hanging on to the underside of the screen, you put your tray in, you've put in the vented cover, you've got it squished up nice and tight, and there's still bees emerging in there or some dying in the oil, then you might have an issue that needs fixing. Sometimes where the screen bottom board meets the wood at the front, they've chewed it away a little bit and they've made a little tunnel into that area. That could be an issue, or there could be another issue that's allowing bees to get into that area. Ideally, no bees can get into the tray because you're using that to trap insects, and you don't want your bees to be trapped.
Hey Cedar, Leanne is asking, I think she was referring to when you were saying you've got to reduce the size for a weak hive to survive a slime out, and she's saying when trying to reduce the size, can you fill the space with blocks of wood or something?
Yes, you could. That's something I haven't done for a very long time, but yeah, I guess there's no reason why you couldn't take up some physical space to reduce the size of the box. However, if you're just saving your colony from hive beetle, you probably won't need to. They're going to take a while to build back up. You're going to have time to prepare some frames to put back in there. If they are still a strong colony, there's lots of bees and you have reduced them, make sure you're putting your frames in. Empty new frames in the edges, because they'll quickly start to build on those. You don't want to get into a situation where you went through that process, you left a gap at the edge, you came back 3 months later and all of a sudden you've got this natural wonderland of comb that's unserviceable. So you'll have to then chop that out, and you know, it's a bit of a pain, but you know, it happens when you forget.
Well, our lucky friend Chuck Raw is saying that hive beetle's not a problem where he is. In Arizona it's too hot and dry, but somebody else is asking, would it be an issue in Florida in the US, do you think?
If anyone's from Florida, chime in, let us know how your hives are going with the hive beetle or whether there is any in that area. Plenty of parts of the states don't have hive beetle because they're too cold or too dry, but there is other parts that do, so let's hear from the locals.
Hey, I've got one actually, Cedar, a personal one. Hi guys, not Trace today, Danica. So my bees are just starting to build into their Flow Super, and so there's all of that empty space. And so there are a few hive beetles, while they're strong down the bottom in the brood, they're okay, but they are getting into that empty space in the flow frames. Would you recommend like putting a couple of extra hive beetle traps up the top of the frames or something to help them at that time where they haven't filled the frames yet?
Okay, so if the bees haven't filled the frames yet, then there's nothing the hive beetles can do. They won't lay in them. It's not really an issue. The bees are using them as a jail. And some people say, oh, look at flow frames, they're bad for hive beetles because look, you can see them all down the cells. The difference is from this hive to a conventional hive is we can see it. Conventional hive doesn't have the windows. If you pull out those frames in a hive next to it, or whatever that's got equal amount of hive beetles, look down the cells, you'll see the bees are corralling the beetles down the conventional frame cells as well. Now, so I typically, there's a few things you could do. If the bees aren't using the box yet, you could take it off again and wait for a flow. But as far as trapping them up the top, I never usually worry. I rely on the beetle trap down the bottom. However, there is a myriad of different hive beetle solutions and traps out there. And by all means, try and see what works for you. It's all about experimenting, trying flow hives, conventional hives, top bar hives, all sorts of different beetle traps. It's all about learning and enjoying the fascinating journey.
Great, thanks Cedar. We've got a lot of questions today about what is the best beginner hive, which I know isn't Hive Beetle related, sorry, but it's coming up so much I thought I'd chuck it in there.
So about half of our customers, of our new community to Flow Hive, are people that have never kept bees before. And it's a great hive for beginners. You don't need to go through that process of learning how to do all the centrifuge and the honey extraction and buying that equipment and so on. It's all kept in a very small footprint. The extraction is happening right here, and it's a really enjoyable thing, harvesting direct to the jar. So certainly flow hives are suitable for beginners. And your question was probably more like, which one? Should it be a classic? Should it be the Flow Hive 6 or the Flow Hive 7? And the answer is any of them are good. What you'll find in the Flow Hive 2 range is you've got some extra features. You've got the pest management tray down the bottom. You don't have that with the classic. It just has a core flute slider. You can make beetle traps. We've got a video somewhere showing you how to do that. So if you can, then the pest management tray is a great help. So I would say go for the Flow Hive 2 or Flow Hive 2 Plus. And as to which size, the 6 or 7, I would say go the 6 if you can, because it's a bit lighter when lifting the supers off. The 7, the bigger one, which matches the 10 frame Langstroth size. There's basically two sizes in beekeeping, in the Langstroth style. So the 7 is more popular in the colder areas because you've got a bit bigger hive, stores a bit more honey to survive the extreme long winters. So if you're in that category, or perhaps you've just got a size that you want to match already, then you can go and get the larger size. So that's really it. Most beginners, this is the perfect choice, where you've got 6 flow frames in the top, and you've got your pest management tray down here, and you've got your beetle, so your ant guards down the bottom, and you can adjust, find your levels. You've got levels, and it's a great hive with lots of features to get going.
Awesome. Arnold's asking, in your experience, Cedar, do bee stings react worse off the more times you get one, or do you begin to get immune to them?
What I find is just occasionally, perhaps it's a very venomous bee, or perhaps it gets you in a spot that's really sensitive, or perhaps both, and it really hurts. And the rest of the time, it doesn't really hurt much at all. And the same goes for swelling. Sometimes, for whatever reason, you get this swelling, perhaps again a sensitive spot, a little venom, and you get some swelling. And you'll learn how your body reacts, I guess, if you're complacent with your beekeeping, you're not wearing gloves and don't mind a few stings. You'll learn how your body reacts to it. Of course, new to beekeeping, protect yourself. You don't want a rough start to beekeeping with lots of stings. Make sure you're wearing your gloves and get some help if you're nervous with it all. But as to whether or not you have a build-up, I'm not sure actually. There's certainly situations where people do seem to, and then there seem to be stories of people going the other way, where after a while they find they're reacting more than they used to. So I'm not really sure on that one. And also be mindful of something called anaphylaxis. Same thing as a peanut allergy and all sorts of other allergies. Really dangerous one. So read up on first aid about anaphylaxis. Some people have that from bee stings. It's rare, but some people have it. So read up on what you need to do in that situation.
Mm-hmm. Somebody's asked, how do the hive beetles get in there in the first place?
So the hive beetles typically will go through the front door. So here we have the front of the hive, the bees are flying in the entrance, and they can fly 15 kilometres, so they'll follow the scent looking for a compost heap, a nice wetting, rotting area, or unfortunately for us, a beehive. And they love the humidity. They take advantage of, they'll prey on a weak hive and just come in through the entrance door, and the bees typically chase them around the hive. In a wet, humid area like this, you'll have hundreds in any one hive, and that's normal, but your bees will keep them at bay. And it's only when the colony gets weak you really need to get worried and start trapping those hive beetles and making sure they don't get the upper hand in your hive.
Hey Cedar, Anne is in New England, New South Wales, and she is getting ready to do her first harvest, and she asks, do you suggest doing a frame check of both the brood and the super a day or so before harvesting?
Okay, the answer is no, but you certainly can if you want to. So, well, I'd advise people to check as often as they like and really get used to beekeeping. It's a wonderful thing. People get so passionate about it, they're checking in all the time. Now, the flow frames are designed to be harvested without having to go through that process of taking the frames out and taking them to an extraction room and all of that. And it works quite well. Now, you'll need to get a little bit used to what this means and what that means for the inside of the hive. Now, I know that in this area, the bees are a bit hungry. And the reason why I know that is they're starting to eat away cells that were full. Now, we've harvested these ones recently, and they're chewing away at the wax now. But they're also starting to take cells like this that were full and empty. And what you'll see soon is this checkerboard pattern where it's totally full and capped and then empty, totally full and capped and empty. Now that's a hungry pattern. That's not the time to harvest. You want to harvest when there's an abundance and the bees are in a filling phase and they're filling up several combs and they're building out. Harvest away at that time. As soon as the frame's full, you can harvest it. And you'll see them putting their capping on the outside, and you'll also get a good idea of what's going on by looking in the side windows as well. So it's designed for you to get a good gauge of when the honey is ready to harvest. And occasionally you'll get into a situation where you've messed up, you've gotten a bit keen or whatever, and you've harvested some honey that's a bit liquid. That simply means that honey will ferment if you leave it on the shelf. So it will need to be consumed, turned into honey mead, or mixed with some other thicker honey to get the moisture content down below that 20% range so that it will keep on the shelf. You can see in this window that we've harvested this frame. We harvested this frame Friday, so that was just 5 days ago, and we're looking in at the bees who have been uncapping it, and they've uncapped all the cells. They're not in a hurry at the moment for two reasons. The colony's a bit thin on the ground and there's no nectar flow. If there was a nectar flow, they'd be like, quick, quick, make more room, and they would chew away that capping much quicker, picks up the cells, and the process starts again. They've got multiple frames in here that they're going through the same process. They've just been harvested, they're chewing away, fixing up the cells. If you have a look at this one, they've hardly started to remove the capping. They're only just starting in the corner. They've actually left the capping on, even though beneath their feet is an empty cell. So, but over the next few days, they'll rip all that capping off and the whole process starts again.
Cool. Hey Cedar, we've got some people asking about classic hives and hive beetles. So how do you use the pest management tray alternative with the classic? And can you adapt your classic to have the Flow Hive 2 tray?
We do. We have made that available by popular demand. You can get just the base. So it comes as a whole base with the legs, with the tray. Oh, actually, you can get it. You might be able to get it without the legs. To check on that one, but it comes with the base and the tray, and you can then put your classic on top of that to gain those features. Now, if you want to make a hive beetle trap with the core flute slider, so I don't have one right here to show you, but your classic's got just a sliding white piece of core flute at the bottom underneath the screen. Now that you can do a few things with. There's a video somewhere showing you how to make a fluff trap. basically you get a material that's fluffy on the underside, the kind of material you'll find on a cheap takeaway place, where you've got the vinyl on top and underneath is this fluffy surface to stop it sliding on the table. Go down to your textile store, they'll have rolls of this stuff, and you can get a bit, and what you'll need to do is cut it out the size of your core flute slider. Then you'll need to glue or stick it firmly to your core flute slider, and you can do that by using some nice wide double-sided tape. If it's nice thin, the kind you'd use to stick carpet down to the floor, that carpet tape. Or you can use glue, as I said. So the reason why you need to stick it down is because you're putting that core flute with the fluffy stuff on it in the bottom slot, must be in the bottom slot. What happens is the bees can reach through that screen, and if they can get to the fluff, they'll start tugging on it and tugging on it and tugging on it for some reason. I know we told them that they shouldn't, but there they are tugging on the core flute slider fluff, and they pull it up through the screen, and you go to pull your slider out and it won't come because it's all tangled up. So that's the reason why you need to stick it down. Now what it does is it's got this fine, I can imagine a fine fuzzy like a Velcro. Hive beetles happen to have these spurs right on their legs, and they'll get stuck in it and they'll get tangled, and you'll catch a lot like that. So that's one way to catch hive beetles. You can make that kind of trap with this kind of tray as well if you wanted to. Or another alternative is you get a Tupperware container and somehow put it up under your hive so that it's against the mesh. It'll probably have to be quite a thin one. Put some oil in it. Bees can lick to about 7 millimeters through the mesh, so you're going to want your oil sitting below 7 millimeters from the mesh, or they might actually get a taste of that oil, which I guess is not nice. Yeah, there's a few options there, and there's a myriad of other solutions out there by other people that you can put traps in between frames. A bit more labour intensive because you've got to take your box off to check them and so on. But nevertheless, lots of people like those kind of traps as well.
Cedar, Christine's saying that she's just beginning, and a couple of times she's filled up a tray and she's had about 50 hive beetles in it each time. And she's asking, like, will they just eventually die in there? Or, like, what I'm getting from that is there a chance if you discard the oil and the hive beetles just bounce back out of it and back into your hive? And
once they're still and not moving, they're dead. So, and all the oil's clogging up their pores. They've got an exoskeleton and it's clogging up the pores, and they're gonna die pretty quickly if they've been submerged in oil for any length of time. So this one here, we threw in there earlier, and it's already curled up and given up the ghost. So that's working well there as a hive beetle trap. And there's another one that's just fallen in, see there, wriggling away. So after a little while that one will die too. It's just in front of my finger, you can see its legs still moving. Sorry about that. You're another sentient being. You didn't mean to be in the wrong place, but you are. So anyway, you certainly don't mind trapping hive beetles once you've been through a slime out, and you know what devastation they can cause to a hive. Thanks very much for all of your questions. We've got time for one more before we wrap this one up, and best of luck if you're in one of these humid, wet areas at the moment. You've got the hive beetles. Remember to stay onto it. Check in your windows. Check that your colony's strong, and trap the hive beetles if your colony is weak.
Okay, lucky last one. Greg he's in Hawk's Nest, and he's saying after a few seasons his flow frames have discoloured a little bit, and does that mean that he should give them a bit of a clean, or is it not really necessary?
Okay, generally the bees will look after the flow frames in the hive, but as you say, if you've been through many seasons and many years have gone past, the wax will build up and and you'll start to lose this clear view here. Now, it's I would tend to just leave it and keep using the flow frame, let the bees manage it, but if you want to go through a disassembly process, we do have videos of how to do that. You can take the clear plate off and scrub all the wax off with some hot water and so on. Or another thing that you can do while the frame's actually together is use a hot water gurney or hot water blaster. Now that does clean the wax off, but the water temperature needs to be above the wax melt temperature of 63 degrees. So you're going to be somewhere around 70 degrees for your hot water. Now hot water pressure washers are expensive, so but you can just put the intake from a really hot water service that's nice and hot, or you can put the intake from a tub of hot water and do it that way. So if you do want to go through that process of cleaning up and getting back to a nice beautiful view, then that's one thing you can try. Thank you very much for all your great questions, and sorry to hear a couple of you out there have lost your hive to the hive beetle. And if you're just tuning in now, then and you've got a hive beetle issue, then make sure you watch the start of this video, because we went through the procedure to save your colony from a slime out. And a slime out's where the hive beetles, larvae, and all their maggots get all the way through the hive, and it turns into a hive beetle nest instead of a beehive. So hopefully this video helps a few of you out there save your hive when it gets in trouble. But otherwise, if your colony is healthy and strong, you've got lots of bees, then you shouldn't really need to worry about it. Thanks so much for tuning in. Let us know what you'd like us to cover next week, and we'll have something interesting to talk about.